Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am Philanthropone, and I am back with another video here. The time has come for me to give my top 5 favorite HTC Vive games of 2017. I have to say, 2017 was an awesome year for the HTC Vive. There were a lot of really good games, and I had to make some tough decisions, but I'm quite happy with the picks that I made. Just like my top 3 videos, these 5 games are ranked from 1 to 5, with 1 being my favorite HTC Vive game of 2017. I have 31 honorable mentions, and those games are every game that made it in my top 3 videos but isn't included in this one. So without further ado, here are my top 5 favorite HTC Vive games of 2017. Number 5, Fallout 4 VR. I am still playing Fallout 4 VR, and it feels like I have hardly scratched the surface. As you may have saw, this game won my number 1 game in December, and here is my commentary for that. When I considered Fallout 4 VR to be in this top 3 video, I looked past all of the double standards that people have applied to it. Yes, I know there are performance issues with the game still, but I made this pick with the assumption that the devs will patch the game and fix performance issues for those of us who are unfortunate enough to get the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update, which is a cause of massive performance issues with the game. But I said this with Doom as well. Could you imagine if this game wasn't called Fallout 4 and was some random indie game called Beantown Gets Nuked or something? Could you imagine the praise this game would get even in its current state? The game is totally playable, and we're talking about hundreds of hours of gameplay, which is unheard of in any VR story-based game. In comparison, there are amazing single-player story-driven games like The Gallery and Form that are beloved by many, and those games have 5 hours of gameplay or less. They also offer very little replay value, but guess what? Fallout 4 doesn't have any replay value because there is so much friggin' content that you won't ever need to play it again when you're through with it, most likely. The VR version of Fallout 4 features all of the content as the original, and one thing I was pleasantly surprised with was the controls and how well they work on the Vive. They definitely take some getting used to, but it's probably the best they could ever have dreamed of making them for VR, as the game takes full advantage of pretty much every single function of a Vive controller you can think of, and relies heavily on swiping the Vive's trackpad when operating the Pip-Boy, something that not a ton of VR games even utilize at all. Like I said, the game is totally playable in its current state, at least for me it is, and I'm running the game with no workarounds to aid performance. Let's just hope that the people over at Bethesda continue to work on improving the performance issues with this $60 Vive game, making Fallout 4 VR the most expensive Vive game ever to release. Number 4, 2MD VR Football. Now this is the one game that did not get a number 1 spot and actually got number 3 for the month of September. But when I was making this video, I decided to make my playtime amount a big factor in deciding what my top 5 games were in 2017. And I went back to play 2MD VR Football a lot more than the other titles that won in September, which were Zing: The Land Beyond and Ocean Rift. I have 5.8 hours of playtime for TMD VR Football, which may not seem like much, but for someone such as myself who rarely has time to play games for quote-unquote fun, it feels like a lot. Anyways, such a fun game, and here is my commentary for when it was in my top 3 for September. Now this game probably won't be for everyone, especially if you're not a sports fan, but I think it's a blast. I have played one other football game on the Vive, but it was strictly just throwing drills, and I have voiced my desire for one day playing a VR football game that puts you in a scenario where it feels like you're an actual quarterback in a real football game. And while it's not perfect, this game is the closest thing to that, as you play against a team made up of NPC opponents who can even sack you if you're careless with the ball or draw up a bad play.
There it is. Ooh, I like that play a lot better. Number 11, we're going to you, man. Be ready, set, hot, hike. Yes, he got it. He got covered right at the end, though. Holy cow, it sets us way back. Okay, go. Oh, yes!
Speaking of drawing up plays, it's easily one of the game's highlight features as you are given a whiteboard to literally draw out which routes you want your teammates to run. You can even draw up a play to do handoffs as if you have a running back. So rather than just being a game about throwing a ball, it also becomes a game about strategy, just like in real football.
Now this is really cool. Like I was saying, you can design your own plays. It's super easy. Like here's a receiver, let's put him out there. He'll be my Hail Mary type of guy, my Hail Mary receiver. Way down there, he'll be my last resort. Let's put a number 2 over here, and he'll be my slant out guy. Woo, there we go. Oh, and if you drop the pen, it'll just go right back up there.
Calling plays is also a breeze, as all you gotta do is use the trackpad, which allows you to hold 4 plays per controller. The game currently goes for $10 on Steam. Number 3, Ultra Wings. I've got 9.6 hours of playtime in Ultra Wings, which makes it one of my most played VR games ever. I played so much of it so fast that I actually began to run into parts of the game that felt a little bit unfinished with bugs here and there, and it was really cool helping out the devs pan out some of those issues, which I'm sure by now are non-issues. It is such a fun game, and if you like flight simulators mixed with arcade-like gameplay, then I can highly recommend it. Here's my commentary for the game when it won number 1 in the month of July. Ultra Wings is going down as one of my favorite Vive games of all time, probably within my top 5. It's an open world flight game that does a brilliant job at blending simulator and arcade elements in its gameplay. I have now spent more playtime in Ultra Wings than any other Vive game to date, clocking in at 8 hours. With my busy YouTube schedule, I hardly ever have time to play a game a second time, but I have gone back to play Ultra Wings over and over again because it's just so fun. Not only is it easily my favorite VR sit-down game, but it's also the only sit-down game I can play for extended periods of time without ever feeling motion sickness. I'll be honest, most $25 VR games I've played are not worth their price tag, but Ultra Wings is worth every penny in my opinion. One of my favorite things about the game is the way you progress. There is no teleporting from island to island, and you have to manually fly and land on each island and buy an office there to unlock new missions and planes. Speaking of landing, it's super fun and easily my favorite part to any flight. It can be challenging and can create some suspenseful moments as landing becomes the last step to completing many of the missions.
Was the runway, and this is also super freaky, flying to a brand new island, because if I crash, like, do I start back at the mountain and do another 6-minute flight? Oh man, I don't want to think about it. We're in the yellow there, see? Let's kill it. Beautiful. I'm home, boys!
As you advance into deeper content, you will run into bugs, but the devs are constantly at work patching the game on a nearly daily basis. And with that said, I'm going to end the video now so I can go play some more. Number 2, Form. Form won number 1 in the month of June and instantly became my favorite single-player story-driven puzzle game in virtual reality. Until my number 1 pick came along, that is. What I loved was that the puzzles were not super frustrating or complicated, so that level of immersion was always there and I just loved it. So here's my commentary for the game when it won number 1 for the month of June. Form is not a typical puzzle game. It's more than a puzzle game. It's one of those games that only comes along every once in a very long while. I honestly cannot think of a better VR game that tops Form's level of immersion, and it's hands down one of the best VR titles that I have ever played. One of the things that is often very underappreciated in video games is sound design. The sound in Form is easily the best I have ever heard in virtual reality, as you will hear very different and distinct noises from every little moving part you see. also loved the background ambience as well, which fits perfectly with the mysterious environment you're put in. Coupled with its amazing sound design are top-notch graphics as well, and the particles and effects you see throughout the game are pure eye candy. As for the puzzles, they're not the most challenging out there, but I honestly think that getting stuck on a puzzle would ruin the experience that Form offers, and that's what I loved about Form, was the experience. The puzzles were just an added bonus. And number 1, my favorite game of 2017, The Gallery Episode 2, Heart of the Emberstone. The game was amazing. It built upon everything that was great about Episode 1 and made it greater. And the storytelling, presentation, and new gameplay mechanics are just a few of the reasons why I chose this as my number 1 pick. And this has already been a longer than expected video, so I'll just get right to it and play my commentary for the game when it won number 1 in the month of October. All I can say is look out for this one being on my top 5 list for best Vive games in 2017. I'm not sure where it will rank exactly, but it's guaranteed a spot. The game immensely lived up to the hype in my opinion and exceeded all of my expectations. It's the best sequel I've played in VR, and I'm astonished at how well the devs continued this epic saga with gameplay that was entirely revamped for this episode, mainly because of the use of the gauntlet. If you were to play Episode 1 today, some may argue that the gameplay would feel outdated now that the Vive has been out for about a year and a half. So there was some concern on my part that may carry over to Episode 2, but boy was I wrong. Unlike the first episode, the gameplay revolves around the use of the gauntlet, which lets you levitate objects and is key to solving a lot of the puzzles. And if you watch my videos regularly, you may know that I'm very picky when it comes to puzzles in VR games, and I have to say, Heart of the Emberstone absolutely nailed it as far as balance goes. They were creative and challenging, but just below that frustration threshold that I often gripe about in VR puzzle games, which made solving them extremely gratifying and rewarding. One of the coolest puzzles in my opinion were the glorified loop wire games, so to speak, that you often have to complete in order to unlock doors or activate elevators. The goal is to guide an object through a mini obstacle course without coming in contact with anything. If you fail, you gotta start over.
I was so far.
I will admit that unfortunately the game does lose a lot of its 1980s nostalgia that I loved about the first game, but there are still cassette tapes to be found. The visuals are absolutely gorgeous, and although most story-driven games offer little replay value, I can easily see myself going back to play The Gallery Episode 2 at least one more time. The devs claim you can play Episode 2 without ever having played Episode 1, but I'd recommend doing Episode 1 because A, it's part of the story, and B, it's an awesome game as well. You can pick up Episode 2 for $29.99 or get a bundle with both games for $45. As for the game's length, playtime will vary, but it took me around 4 hours to complete, which is about double the length of Episode 1. Alright, and there you have it guys, my top 5 favorite HTC Vive games to release in 2017. Let me know what your favorite Vive games were last year, because I definitely can see a lot of people disagreeing with my choices, but there they are. And I'd also appreciate it if you like the video, and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to know what my top 3 Vive games are every month in 2018, because I'm going to continue doing those videos this year as well. So that's all. Thank you so much for watching if you made it to the end of this video, and I can't wait for another great year for the HTC Vive and VR in general. Until next time, peace.